Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and woohoo! If you think that I should be screaming at the top of my lungs because Canada's infamous Bill C-11 has passed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this has been kind of likened to the Censorship Act in the country, the Protect Act, the Restrict Act of Canada, if you will, something really doom and gloom. And to an extent, it's such a badly written piece of legislation, especially for content creators and people in the online web space, that even YouTube had an entire campaign coming up to me, probably Linus, JJ McCullough, a bunch of Canadian creators, and it basically begged us to call the MPs, raise some awareness. Hey, YouTube, if you want to affect politics, do it the old American way, throw some of that Google money around, if you will. But, ladies and gentlemen, Bill C-11 has passed in the last 2 days. Now, if you notice that I'm not necessarily sage or crazy, it's because, I try to always find outs, okay? So, we've moved our company, pretty much. We've started a new one down in the United States. I'm going to see how regulation goes in the next few months, but there's a pretty good chance that we'll probably move all of our operations to the United States, which means that a lot of that money that would have been generated in Canada will just feed right back into the United States. Bold thinking there, Canadian government, trying to, push out, your digital creators to greener pastures, if you will. Now, I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. Most creators don't have that luxury. Most people don't have the luxury to uproot their stuff and move down to greener pastures. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bill C-11 has reached royal assent, which means all it really needs is to be signed in. It's basically when the bill becomes the law. Now, according to the law, right over here, the most recent text that I have, they basically talk about, a few exclusions they have, such as social media services, an online undertaking, which, according to their own language, enterprise en ligne, means an undertaking for the transmission or retransmission of programs over the internet for reception by the public by means of broadcasting receiving apparatus. So when they're talking about this, they're including big organizations like Netflix, like Amazon Prime Video, like YouTube. At the end of the day, the broadcasting bill is mostly aligned not just for not for censorship. That's not what it's designed for. It's designed to really target the big tech companies that have now come into Canada. To understand, Canada is a country that's pretty much run by monopolies and oligopolies. So in Canada, when it comes to TV and video broadcasts, which is a field I worked in pretty extensively, we have the big broadcasters like Rogers, like Bell, like Shaw Media. A lot of these guys have been in Canada since the beginning, and unfortunately for them, a lot of these American companies like Netflix, like YouTube have come in and absolutely given a whole variety of options for Canadians. Now, for a lot of Canadian broadcasting laws, there was a requirement of Canadian content to be produced. Now, up until this law passed, the only people that had to follow it were some of these big Canadian broadcasters. Not YouTube, not Netflix, not Spotify, not these American tech companies. Because of how much broadcasting these companies do now, Canada is now regulating them all the same. So that's kind of the pretext for this. So according to this law, when it comes to social media services, an online undertaking that provides a social media service does not, for the purpose of this act, exercise programming control over programs uploaded by a user of the service who is not the provider of the service or the provider's affiliate. So this amendment is actually pretty good, and it's the reason why I think YouTube has not really been saying anything ever since this bill has passed. But to give you a quick idea of what this effectively is doing is, obviously YouTube is an online undertaking. It's a broadcaster. If you go to YouTube right now, you can buy TVs, movies, whatever you want. That is technically what they want to regulate. They want to push more Canadian content in that category for average users. So when they say it's uploaded by a user who is not the owner, so basically people like me, I don't own YouTube, I upload to it, or even an affiliate, which is actually good wording because it could mean like, hey, I am partnered with YouTube, right? But that doesn't mean that I own YouTube. I'm just, I guess you would say, a loosely worded affiliate. And the same would go for a TikToker. I think the same would go for anybody who's on a platform that offers revenue sharing, which I think is a good amendment, but there is one piece later on in this entire legal document that kind of throws everything up into limbo, if you will. Again, the problem with laws like this is they're so vaguely written, all right? And again, it's not easy to be hyper definitive when it comes to legal matters, but you know, it's tough. Well, let's go look a little bit further into it, but for now, this is actually a pretty good amendment. Now, the really scary part about this is YouTube is telling us, Canadian creators, that this can affect the algorithm forcibly. Right now, the way that the recommendation system works is it picks the perfect content for you to watch. Even if you're not signed into YouTube, you have a digital footprint on this site. Your cookies, your browser fingerprinting, basically all the videos you watch here all tally up and create a profile of you. YouTube recommends what you are most likely to watch. So the reason why this is bad for creators if the government gets involved is YouTube and a lot of these companies like TikTok invest millions, billions of dollars into making the perfect recommendation systems. So when YouTube recommends you my video, it's because you're probably more likely to watch me over somebody else, even covering the same topic. And again, this is a purely merit-based solution. YouTube wants it like this, not because they're trying to help me out, but because they want you to be on their site for hours a day. You ever wonder, like, damn, I've been browsing shorts or TikTok or watching YouTube videos for 5 hours. That's because YouTube is giving you the content you want to watch on autoplay or the recommended, so you keep dumping hours of your life into watching their videos, because the more YouTube you watch, the less of their competitors you watch, and the more ads you watch, and the more money you generate for YouTube. That's the whole goal of this situation. So again, when the government gets involved, what they want to do is promote people like me to more Canadians. Now, the reason this is bad is if I'm artificially shown to Canadians who don't want to watch my videos for whatever reason, then because they won't click on my video, I get punished internationally. Now, Canadians have never gotten the benefit from the Canadian Media Fund or content or whatever in a broad scale. We've always been competing on our own. So for the government to get involved and try to protect us is fucking meaningless, and we don't really care for it. Any Canadian creator that's falling for the Kool-Aid doesn't actually understand how bad this is. If you want to succeed in the global village, you have to compete with the global village. So again, let's go back down into here, okay? So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look into further acts of this law. So for instance, right over here, they actually tell you paragraphs in 7, they tell you programming. And this is the programming right here. It reflects the Indigenous cultures of Canada, and programming that is in Indigenous languages should be provided. So basically for the native population over here, they need to have their programming pushed, especially for when they're positioned to serve smaller and remote communities, which is important. What these guys want to do is make sure when you're on the rural side of Canada, your local news, your provincial news gets pushed more in the algorithm than everyone else or the big, tech. But of course, you've got program that is accessible without barriers to person with disabilities should be provided within the Canadian broadcasting system. Okay, they want all of that. Programming that is accessible without barriers to persons with disabilities. Now, importantly, it's 7Q, which we have to read. Online undertakings that provide the programming services of other broadcasting undertakings should ensure the discoverability of Canadian programming services and original Canadian programming, including French language programs, in an equitable proportion. So what they're talking about is cancon. Now, if you don't know what cancon is effectively a moniker for Canadian content, which basically is a requirement by the Canadian Radio, Televisions and Commission, basically the FCC of Canada, if you will, where basically radio and television, or I guess streaming broadcasters now, have to produce a certain amount of content that is partially written, produced, or presented in Canada. Now, I've worked with people who are producing CanCon a lot. So again, when it comes to Canadians, like Canadian content, right from a government website, if you check what makes it Canadian, you'll see right here. So in order for it to be, the producer has to be Canadian. Now, let's just relegate this to somebody uploading YouTube videos like me. So the producer must be Canadian. I am. My nationality is Canadian. My driver's license is from my province. Yes, I'm a Canadian. The production earns a minimum of 6 out of 10 points, where the key creative functions are performed by Canadians. Now, for a content creator like me, The points could easily be, I'm the director, I'm the screenwriter, I'm the performer, I'm the production designer, I'm all of these things, okay? So as long as 6 out of 10 of these points all go to a Canadian, me, it should technically be CanCon. Now, of course, at least one of either the director or screenwriter positions, or at least one of the 2 performers, must be Canadian. These are roles you cannot give to an American or anybody that's a foreign national. A minimum of 75% of program expenses and 75% of post-production expenses are paid for services provided by Canadians. So if I'm running my own company and I'm paying myself to edit videos, then yes, I could argue that 100% of that post-production money went to me. That's not including people I'm subcontracting or people that I'm hiring for different stages of the production that are outside of Canada. That works against me. Now, you might be like, wow, is it that simple, Muda? No, it's not. If you look at Linus Tech Tips, recently he was talking about with the WAN show when they were talking about tax credits and whatnot. And I've worked with Canadian tax credits. So basically the CPTC, which is a Canadian Film and Video Production Tax Credit, is basically an entire system within the Canada Revenue Agency that we use to basically submit and get some of our money back in a refundable corporate tax credit. Now, this is great if you want to get some of your money back, especially if you're making productions in Canada. But this law, this system, as you're reading through this sheet right here, is more geared towards really large production houses and those big companies that I was talking about earlier, like Roger, Bell, and Shaw, which already have these divisions ready to go. Your average creator is not going to be able to do this because of the fact that they don't have their own companies, they may not have the money to hire lawyers and accountants to do all of this, and even if they did, it'll take years, especially for somebody who's making content like me, to have everything ready because the onus of paperwork is so heavily stacked against you that you're going to be spending a lot of money before you're going to be seeing the fruits of your labor, so to speak. So the entire Canadian, content system, the Canadian content, the tax credit system is all designed to work in conjunction to basically push if content is Canadian enough. Now, again, I don't believe based on the law or the wording that the online undertaking is including, people like me and you. If that was the case, obviously, most of us would not have the ability to get this going. But again, Canadian media companies may be present into it, broadcasting agencies, we'll have to see in the next coming months. But what this law or this area is trying to address is YouTube and Netflix and Spotify and a lot of these American tech companies now have to also produce Canadian content in the same manner as the broadcasters here. Now, this also brings another question into this. If it costs more money to operate in Canada and deal with these restrictions, what if Netflix or Amazon or Spotify or even YouTube says, forget it, we're just going to pull out of the market, right? That, from what I'm understanding, business-wise, that could be a possibility. If it costs more money to operate in Canada, and it costs a lot of money to also operate these regulations, because again, a lot of the established companies here already have the frameworks in place. But for Netflix, for YouTube, unless they're already preparing now, this could be a massive headache for some of these organizations, especially for Spotify, because they're pretty much the biggest radio broadcaster in the world at this point. So yeah, this is not going to be an easy fix, an easy situation, and I could see that some smaller companies, maybe not YouTube or Netflix because they got so much money to burn, but some smaller agencies might think it's easier to leave the market and just stay to the States. Because even if you look at the population of Canada, again, we're less than the entire pop of California. We're not a massive country, so again, I don't know what the government is expecting trying to put the vice grip like this, but, we'll have to see. So looking into section 4.2, which is regulations onto it, for the purpose of this paragraph, the Commission may make regulations prescribing programs in respect within this act applies in a manner that is consistent with freedom of expression. So in 2A, the extent to which a program, so again, up here they said non-application, which is a Social Media Services Act, does not apply in respect to online undertakings whose broadcasts consist only of programs in respect to which this act does not apply under this subsection. So the extent to which a program uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service like YouTube, like TikTok, Facebook, directly or indirectly generates revenue. So yes, your YouTubers make money, TikTokers make money. People, if I upload my podcast or Some Ordinary Podcast to Spotify and we make money, this would theoretically fall under this regulation. The commission could consider that. The fact that such a program has been broadcast in whole or in part by a broadcast undertaking that is required to be carried on under a license, or is required to be registered with the commission, but does not provide a social media service, and the fact that such a program has been assigned a unique identifier under an international standard system. So because of the vagueness of 4.2, it's what a lot of these coalitions are calling out. This would still broadly provide powers to a vast majority of content that is uploaded to YouTube, Spotify, or TikTok. It could be regulated. That's the problem. And if it's regulated, what they mean by that is it could be affected in the algorithms, which, like I told you earlier in the video, is ultimately a net negative for the average Canadian, content creator. If anybody is feeding you the Kool-Aid that says this helps you because, hey, more Canadians are going to hear about you, remember, you're in the global village. If the government regulations, if the government, approved, recommendation system works against you, you're losing in the global village. For us creators, it's a bad situation. Let me explain just in terms of numbers that most people can understand. Canada has a population of 38.25 million as of 2021. And of course, California, the state of California, has a population, as of 2013, 40.2 million, still larger than all of my country. So again, obviously, when it comes to the breakdown of my channel metrics, it's the United States, which is my most viewed country, the United Kingdom. Canada probably comes at number 5. And if Canada, if that small percentage could affect me in the overall village, I'm losing. That's the problem here, and that's why Canadian creators are a bit worried. Now, I assume if I move to the United States and I move my YouTube channel to a US-based AdSense, a US-based service, I would be out of the Canadian algorithm or out of the regulation rather, and I would be treated as an American. Now, for Canadian creator or Canadian viewers, Canadian content consumers, you might be like, how do I get the algorithm I want? I'm pretty sure if you use a VPN service, you'll probably be able to skirt outside the government regulation, provided your account obviously isn't set to Canada. That might be the only way you can get out of it. And generally, I think I'm scared in the world that's coming at us, because if we're going to need VPNs to bypass government regulations and government monitoring and government alterations of our social media feeds, it's a fucked up world we're living in. And, Canada still doesn't worry me because I don't think the population of viewers is high enough to truly affect the metrics. But if a law like this passes in the United States, then we're all uber fucked. If this passes in the United Kingdom, if a law like this gets drafted, we're all fucked. That's the ultimate issue. The internet, of large, especially when it comes to social media services, is headed in a bad place if countries start regulating it like this. Now, of course, I'm trying to be calm and I'm trying to explain it in the possible way. This situation has become so politicized that, again, I'm just trying to give you the facts of the situation. No, this isn't a censorship bill. But the broadness of the bill can affect what you do see in your feeds at the end of the day. And regardless of what the liberal government is going to tell you, broad laws like this are bad. Now, of course, the conservative government of Canada will tell you this is a fucking way of censorship and control and government surveillance, and it's not that deep. You really have to read the law, and you really have to see just the broadness of it. That's the real bad part. Hopefully there's some emergency meetups. Maybe they can get some things amended. Look, at the end of the day, Canadian politics are truly a cancer of its own. Living in Toronto my whole life, I've never, especially in the last couple of years, I've never met anybody that likes Trudeau. I've never met anybody that likes Ford. Never met anybody that likes Singh. Never met anybody that likes any of these parties. I feel like a lot of these political groups are way too out of touch. And the only reason we vote for them is to just get our cultural push, if you will, our independent cultural desires into the country. And it really does show. Laws like this that are broad, that if I have emailed all the MPs that I could, everywhere, none of it ever matters. Now, I don't even disagree with the idea of Canadian content necessarily. I mean, yes, the American media machine is so large, it can dominate entire countries around the world. It's one of the biggest pieces of conquest that America has. But I don't want to see Canadian content just because it's Canadian on my feeds or televisions or movie services. I want to see it because it's good. There's plenty of Canadian media companies, plenty of Canadian actors, actresses, directors, editors, so on and so forth, musicians that are talented and are successful all over the world, not because they're Canadians, but because they just produce really, really good content. And I think for a lot of YouTubers out there, which, you know, may or may not be affected, given at least that one vague amendment of the law, look, there's a niche that is filled for everything on the internet. We're a global village now, and again, this law really does feel like it's designed to appease a lot of these former legacy media companies that are kicking up to politicians. Because at the end of the day, a politician is like a fucking fancy beggar in a suit, all right? As long as you pay them enough, they will definitely swing towards your side. But at the end of the day, this is like old legacy media trying to throw its last final death throes before it ultimately does die out. You know, this is the age of the internet, a future age where, you know, your content creators are, you know, they're more personalized, they're more geared towards you. And if you want to find certain pieces of content on the internet that wouldn't have existed 10 years ago, you got it now. But ladies and gentlemen, Weird Bill C-11, I'll have to see in the next few months what it looks like, but, you know, if it really does affect YouTubers, which I don't think it will, to be honest, because we have 10% of, maybe 10%, if we're lucky, is Canadian viewership on our channel. And if the algorithm does really affect us from there and it affects us overall internationally, maybe we'll move. But I'm also not super comfortable in leaving behind my country just because the sitting government is so loosey-goosey with bills that they introduce. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, all I wanted to say, this law or act isn't really as doom and gloom as I think it is. You know, there's a reason why Google and YouTube have started talking about it. We'll give it a few months, all right? We'll let them cook, so to speak, and we'll see how things go. But, you know, if I do go down to Texas, then I will be doing tons of Texan-related content, okay? Like, you know, full range days and all the good stuff you would expect out of the old deserts of the southern United States. Yeehaw, buckos. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.